Thank you. I'd like to welcome everyone, members, officers. I don't think there's any members of the public, but I'd like to welcome the applicant and Councillor Munson for joining us to this meeting of the Planning Control Committee. Before the meeting starts, I'd like to invite the committee clerk, Chanel Wickenham, to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those attending remotely, if at all.
Thank you, Chair. We have no one attending remotely today, so I'll go through the rules of debate. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the Chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the Chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will then turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee manager. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room, and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the Chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? And back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Chanel. Item 1, apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Elizabeth Dennis. Having given due notice, Councillor Val Bryant will be substituting for Councillor Dennis. Thank you, Val. Item 2, notification of other business. There was none. Item 3, Chair's announcements. 1, recording. In accordance with the Council policy, this meeting is being recorded. The recording will be available both on the Council's YouTube channel as well as the Council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this meeting. 2, declaration of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item. The detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under Chair's announcement on the agenda. 3, to clarify matters for the registered speakers. Members of the public in groups or supporters or objectors have up to 3 minutes per person. Where there is only one person or public supporter or objector, then that member of the public will have up to 5 minutes. There are separate groups for people registered as member advocate objectors, member advocate supporters, and for the applicant, their agent or representative. This is up to 5 minutes per group. All speakers will receive a warning when you have 1 minute remaining. Following conclusion of your time, members will be invited to ask points of clarification. At the end of your allotted time, you'll be advised that the time allowed has ended and you must cease. 4, Section 4.823A. For the purpose of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be able to vote. 5, community governance review. The Council resolves to commence a community governance review for the whole district, which focuses on parish level arrangements. The first stage of the review is to consult, and the Council is inviting residents, parish councils and any other interested parties to have their say on current arrangements, as well as suggestions for future arrangements via a survey which is open until the 7th of October. There is a dedicated web page on the Council's website titled Community Governance Review, which includes a link to the survey. And 4, public participation. I'm aware that we have Councillor Rolf Munzer and Andy Muffet representing one of the applicants. Okay. So we'll move on to item 5, which is application 23-02946 OP 66 Park Lane, Nebworth, Hertfordshire. Thomas Howe to present. Thanks, Thomas.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. I have distributed a written update, which you should have got, I believe, last night. In essence, the reports did not include the public representations, both objections and representations. However, these were read and considered during the application process, and the written update to you provided a summary of these, and there was 2 objections, 2 representations. The objections mainly focused on the impacts of the proposed improved access, and also some impacts, say, to the maintenance of visibility to the access. as well as the potential suggestion that there was a prejudice of access for the allocated KB1 and KB2 sites, and also neutral representations which were, I believe, identical, which were relating to request for integration of Swift bricks, ecological surveys which were subsequently provided and consulted on by Ecology, together with a request for consideration of biodiversity net gain and ecological enhancement of the site, which again the applicant has agreed to. So since that representation was received, those details were received. Matters of these representations were considered further in point 4.3 in the committee reports, and also within the written update, just a summary of basically how these concerns were considered within the report is provided. Since the draft report and conditions was provided, we've also chosen to add a couple of conditions, which again you've received the wording of. They centre on mainly tree retention and protection throughout the build process, as well as once the site is occupied. So mainly any trees that are shown to be retained must be retained effectively or protected. And also agreed to by the agent, and with a discussion by them, condition 9, which related to sustainability measures. They asked if this could potentially be a reserved matter rather than one for discharge of condition. And as such, I've distributed an updated wording of the condition to legal and committee services, which rather than making the condition pre-commencement and therefore requiring discharge of condition, we've updated it to be requiring details to be submitted at the reserved matters stage, and then they'll be considered and then implemented and enforced that way rather than with a submission. And again, I can distribute that wording to you. Beyond that, I have no other updates. So please, could I have the presentation? Thank you. Actually, sorry, there was a slight one matter. There was a slight discrepancy on one of the plans. So the location and site plan has been superseded with an updated access plan, though the development remains as you've seen before. Also, the application is being determined at committee due to the site area, which is 0.8 hectares, which requires a committee decision as per the council constitution. Next slide, please. This is the site location plan with the centre of Knebworth to the right-hand side or the east of the plan. And A1 is to the left or the west of the plan, with Martlets being that dwelling at the centre of the site. The next slide, please. This is the proposed access plan with the improved access way and footpath in light red, leading to the bottom, which would be to the east, with Martlets being the main dwelling at the centre of the image. And Park Lane is the road on the left. Next slide, please. This is standing opposite the access to the site. That's the existing access to Martlets, also known as 66 Park Lane. The road is Park Lane looking towards the motorway or west, and this is taken from the opposite side of the road. Next slide, please. And then this is pivoted to the right, looking towards Knebworth and Park Lane towards the east, with the existing access on the left. Next slide, please. And then this is taken from within, looking down towards where the footpath is proposed as part of the sustainability measures. This is the existing access from Martlets. Next slide, please. And then this is taken from further within the site, looking back towards Park Lane, or south is the centre of image. Next slide, please. And then this is again pivoted 180 degrees, looking within the site, looking north, with the main dwelling on the left and some of the associated buildings in front. Next slide, please. And then this is the outbuilding at the end of that image, just closer up, so further within the site and further north. Next slide, please. This is beyond that building, looking to the eastern boundary, so the right-hand side of the plan and towards Nebworth. Next slide, please. And then this is from towards the northern boundary, looking back down within the site. The left-hand side is east. Next slide, please. And then this is northern boundary within the site, so a bit further within, but looking north. Next slide, please. Ah, there you go. Thank you.
Done. Thank you very much. Thank you for that report. Do we have any questions for the planning officer? Councillor Brown was first off the mark.
Thank you. I may have missed this in the report, but the original house is to be maintained. Is that correct? Yes, that's my first question. And my second question is, it would be really nice to see a plan with how it relates to KB1. It is right adjacent, isn't it? But we don't have one, do we?
Not on my presentation, but we can.
But my understanding from looking on the map from the local plan is it's right in the corner of KB1, isn't it? It's butts right up into that site. Okay. Did I have any other questions? Oh, I've got one other question, but that might be for the applicant, so I'll leave that.
If we bring up the location plan, we might be able to show you it's to the north of the site. So
Yeah.
it does.
North and east, isn't it?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
Might be the next slide or the first slide, I think, on the first plan. Yes. Oh, it's to the north and east. The access for KB1, I believe, is to the east, or it stretches down that field to the right, basically, into the north.
Thank you.
Councillor Peace.
I've got a couple of quick questions. The first is, there's some discussion about the visibility as you come out of that development. Who would be responsible for maintaining the vegetation there so that the visibility is maintained? Would that be Highways?
I'm not 100% sure. Could I defer to Sean, please?
The land within the highway would be the responsibility of the Highway Authority. The land that's within the application site would be the responsibility of the owner of that land to keep it back. But the visibility displays are predominantly within the highway. So it would be for the Highway Authority to keep it controlled.
Okay, and the second quick one, there's a letter in with the documents from a company called Barker Parry, and they seem to be the developers for KB1 and KB2. And they say the upgrading of the Martlets access could impact on the location and deliverability of the respective accesses for KB1 and KB2. So is there any danger that this access could affect those sites? Because they are much bigger sites, obviously.
So the matter is acknowledged, and their representation is acknowledged. However, there was quite a lot of work done with Highways. I think basically there was an updated visibility display, as well as to ensure an alteration to say the planting and such, because it is a slope and an entrance to Nebworth. But Highways were completely okay with what's proposed in front of you. But I don't think this can prejudice determination on that one, if that makes sense.
Yes, Highways have looked at it. They're fully aware of KB1, of course, and have had various meetings and discussions with various parties about KB1. So the Highways were very much aware of the presence of the access to KB1 and where it will need to go generally, and sought to ensure that there would be no conflict between this access, which only would serve 9 dwellings, so it would be a relatively modest use for this access compared to KB1, of course. And so that was looked at when considering the application.
Thank you.
Councillor Tyson.
Thank you. I think my question is in the same sort of vein, really, and it was about the cumulative impact on the highway of what will be 3 access points, one from the 2 that we just mentioned. Obviously, this one's relatively minor, but there's also KB2, which is going to come out onto Park Lane as well. So at some point, the NPPF says you have to take into account the residual cumulative impacts on the road network. If they were severe, we might have a problem. And has Highways taken that into account yet? At what point do we look at the cumulative impacts of these things, or do we rely entirely on the local plan, which presumably has already done so?
Yes, KB1 and KB2 obviously are allocated sites in the local plan, so there's a reasonable assumption that they will move forward. What we don't have, however, is an application at the moment and all the supporting transport assessments that will need to accompany those applications, which will, of course, assess these sites. The existing planning permission, if you grant planning permission today for the 9 dwellings, the work for KB1 and 2 would have to take that into account. But having said that, because they are allocated sites, that has been considered for this application as well. Moving forward, the transport assessments will, for KB1 and 2, will need to assess its impacts upon the local highway network and its capacity and effects, and that will be work that's work that I'm sure the owners and Countrywide or Vistry or whoever it is at the moment will be undertaking work on as we speak, as I understand. I believe they're at early stages of master planning on this site. The master planning has been going on that site for some time and was delayed due to a change in ownership of the developer company. So we will be moving forward fairly soon with that. Does that answer your question, Councillor Tyson, or do you want to follow up?
I think it does. Yes.
Right.
I'm never quite sure about these sort of cumulative things. What comes first and so on. Chairman, could I ask another question, please? This is probably got an answer to this already, but I was minded to ask if there was a specific time frame for these outline applications and whether there's a deadline by which they have to be implemented. And I've just seen that there's a condition here and also in the other one that we're looking at tonight of a 3-year period. Is that a national guideline, or is that okay? Thank you.
Yes, you don't actually have to impose that condition. It is a standard requirement for every application set in legislation, but most local planning authorities do impose that condition so that people know, basically, the layperson looking at the decision. But yes, outline permission, the reserved matters would have to be submitted within 3 years.
Okay. I have no more speakers indicating. I would remind members of the committee that there's no applicant and no member advocate here. So if you've got any more questions, you might wish to ask the officers. Thank you, Ruth.
I
Councillor
do
Pratt.
then. I'm going to ask my standard question. Why 9? I mean, obviously, this is not an allocated site, so there isn't a allocated number. But could this site sustain 12?
Don't have that information in front of me, but I believe it's almost indicative at this point, rather than kind of a set figure. I did include some comments in my report about the density of the development in design terms. And while it's kind of just an informal steer, it doesn't set any kind of number in stone. But as far as I'm aware, I don't think there's a specific number set and why there's kind of rationale between why they've done 9. But that's not what I'm aware of.
Okay, so can I come back on that? So the parish council have asked for section 106, but obviously they can't have it, and you've considered that in your report. They can't have it for 9. My understanding is section 106 kicks in at 10, isn't it? And affordable housing at 12, or have I got those the wrong way around? So this is what worries me about these 9-unit developments, that we don't get the associated. And I know there is a unilateral undertaking proposed, but it worries me that we don't get the associated infrastructure with these small cumulative developments.
Nick, did are you happy for me to, are you done?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. I did consider, I believe they can request a section 106 because of the site area, if I'm correct, I'm not sure, but and I did consider their request, and I felt that it didn't meet the tests of the obligations and regulations, in that it didn't, I'll pull them up. Sorry, I'm just having them in front of me. The first one was it didn't make it they weren't necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. I didn't consider that they were directly related to the development or acceptable in scale and nature, basically. But I did consider their request, and that's why we do have the highways contributions, such as with the footpath, but also their sustainability contributions, and not the Nebworth Parish Council ones. So they were considered, but I didn't consider them to meet the tests. So that was why that happened effectively.
Something.
So does that mean that the parish council could come back and request that S10, that particular request could come for the KB1 or KB2, for example?
Yes, as you know, this is a relatively small scale site for 9 dwellings, and there's a limit to what one could reasonably ask for in a Section 106, given that the Section 106 monies would have to be necessary to make the development acceptable in planning terms. The Parish Council, I believe, asked for a contribution of £20,000 towards upgrading the lighting to Village Hall. A development of 9 dwellings, it wouldn't fit with that requirement of it being necessary to grant planning permission effectively. In other words, without that contribution, the development would be unacceptable, and I don't think we're anywhere near that. Whereas with KB1 and 2, given the scale of that development, then one could, rather than Parish Council necessarily asking for upgrading the lighting, they may wish to enhance that facility to make it able to accommodate the additional number of people that would be generated by the development. That would link it into being necessary in terms of the necessity test, is what it's called. As far as normally, the County Council Growth and Infrastructure Unit and the District Council do not ask for financial contributions in the form of a Section 106 for developments of 10 or less. And with regards to affordable housing, it should be 11 or more. So this is below the normal threshold for financial contributions to both the District Council and the County Council. However, the Highway Authority, in terms of the sustainable transport contributions, are asking for contributions below that 10-unit threshold. They asked for the contribution, they justified it, and therefore the applicant has offered a unilateral undertaking offering that money.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions at this stage? Councillor Peace.
Sorry, it's me again. I just want to check, I think it's right, that we're not considering housing mix at this point, because this is just an outline. So Nebworth have got a neighbourhood plan, and I know they've got a policy on housing mix, but that will come into play once reserve matters come in, yeah?
Yes, that's correct. When we get the reserve matters, we'll have details of scale and appearance and layout. And scale, it relates to the number of bedrooms within each unit and the size of each unit.
Okay, any further questions? Okay. The officer's recommendation is to grant permission for this application. Can I have a proposer of a motion to approve, refuse, or defer the application? I've got Councillor Mantle.
Propose that it be accepted.
Thank you, Councillor Mantle. Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Councillor Muir.
Yes, I will second it.
Thank you. Do we have any debate on the application? Councillor Tyson.
The only thing that I'd like to say is that I don't know quite historically how it came to be that this little site is a windfall site and wasn't part of KB1 in the first place, because if it were, then it would have been able to make a contribution to the affordable housing in the district, and I think it's a shame that it doesn't. But other than that, at this stage, I think there's no reason to object to it.
Thank you. Any further debate? Councillor Bryant, yours.
Just to agree with Councillor Tyson. It's a shame that it is that way, but there is no objections.
Thank you. In that, is it appropriate to move to a vote at this stage? So can I see all those in favour of approving the application? Sorry. Everyone voted in.
Chair, the motion's carried.
Thank you for the reminder, James. Okay, we can move on to item 6, which is application 21000541 OP land between 134 and 148 High Street, Kimpton. Andrew Hunter to present. Andrew.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. So I have one update to report. This relates to the Kimpton Parish Council comments, and in Appendix 1 to the report, the comments from Kimpton Parish Council are from an email from the Parish Council sent on 25th March 2021, which were the first response to the application. It has, however, been realised that there were also comments from the Parish Council submitted on the website, dated 18th February 2022, which members may have seen, that include an additional section not quoted in their email in Appendix 1 to the report. And the later comments from the Parish Council concern requested Section 106 obligations referred to as Part 2 in their later comments that are on the website. And as these comments have been public on the website for some time, they can be summarised as referring to funding to pursue the provision of up to 24 social homes, provision of extended outdoor exercise equipment area to the recreation ground, provision of multi-purpose play space and recreational facilities at Parkfield Sports Ground, and refurbishment of the recreation ground pavilion. And the reasons given are an identified need for affordable housing, and that the development would create demands for increased use of fitness and leisure equipment and facilities. No cost details were provided, with the comments stating that the facility improvements were in the feasibility stage in consultation with the community, and once the requirements were finalised, quotes are to be obtained. And further to these comments, as they concern the leisure facilities, and following a request made to the Parish Council in March 2022 for costings and other detailed information, no response has been received or has been provided. And affordable housing provision is addressed in the officer report. So if we can now go to the slides, please. First slide. So, yeah, this shows the site. It is allocated housing site KM3 in the local plan within the Kimpton settlement boundary on the western side of Kimpton. Next slide. This is looking north up the site, approximately where the vehicular access is proposed. Next slide. This shows most of the east site boundary with number 134 High Street, and the top of the hedge left of centre of the photo is where the north boundary of the site effectively starts. Next slide. This shows the rest of the east boundary and part of the south boundary, and it's facing east in towards the main part of Kimpton. Next slide. This is looking northwest up the site. Next slide. This is looking to the rest of the west site and that boundary, and more of the south boundary. And next slide. This shows part of the site on the right and existing residential development on the left, and looking west out of Kimpton. Next slide. This shows a wider view of Kimpton with the red-edged site location plan on the left side. Next slide. This is a more detailed topographical plan of the site and the surroundings. Next slide. So this shows the proposed access and the visibility displays detailed plan, and the proposal itself is an outline planning application for 15 dwellings, of which 10 would be market and the remaining 5 affordable, and all matters are reserved except for the access, which is proposed, as you see, to constitute one new vehicular access onto Kimpton High Street. And next slide. This is an indicative layout showing 15 dwellings, the new access and ancillary development within the site. That's the end of the presentation. Thank you.
Do we have any questions for the planning officer? None at all? Thank you. In which case, I will ask the member advocate, Councillor Rolf Munzer. Councillor Munzer, you have 5 minutes. I shall very politely and quietly remind you when there's a minute to go.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I don't think it comes as any surprise to residents in Kimpton that this application is before the committee tonight. I think it's been mooted for development probably since at least I was born. So residents, I'm sure, are expecting this. But the key consideration I want you to have this evening, colleagues, is actually what we have on this site, because I'm sure you agree with me that the local plan is about ensuring that we are delivering on the housing need of our local communities. And I just want to make a few observations. This site is, as you've heard from Mr. Hunter, contained within the local plan under KM3. It's a site allocated for development for 13 homes. What I would seek to argue is that the housing mix of which is proposed by the applicant tonight isn't appropriate for the village and fails to deliver on the housing need for the local community. Now, what I hear out on the doorsteps are two things. That Kimpton is in desperate need of more starter homes, more 1, 2, 3 bedroom homes. We've already seen, and as you can will have seen on that display just there, we have had a development of 9 homes, a mix of 4 to 3 bedrooms adjacent to the site in recent months. They are currently under construction, but we need more starter homes for 2 reasons. It's to ensure that young people are able to remain in the village, so we're able to retain that link and have a growing and youthful village, but equally as well older people. It's surprising the amount of older people who come and speak to me and say, I really want to downsize my home because my family, my children have moved out, but I can't. I want to stay in the village and there is no other alternative. There is no smaller home of which is available. And therefore, I think it's important that we look on the lower end of things when we're talking about development, particularly, as I said, those 1, 2, 3 bedroom homes. Also, a care home many years ago was in place in the village for older residents. So this was something of which they didn't necessarily need to concern themselves with. But that was removed under an alternative development. And therefore, I would think actually a site like this is appropriate for a care home for local residents, because that enables the housing stock elsewhere in the village to be freed up as elderly people move into it. Just with respect to the access, I mean, at this current juncture, I don't see an issue with the access, but should future development take place beyond the site of which is proposed tonight, it could lead to a significant number of vehicular movements, and therefore I would argue a roundabout would be more appropriate rather than a T-junction. And parking as well in the high street, that is a concern to a number of local residents, and it's important that every house of which is proposed has at least a minimum of 2 spaces. That's the policy of the local plan. It would be good if we could see even more to reduce the pressure on the high street. Now, a number of local residents have got in touch with me about an established footpath 33, which runs to the right-hand side of the development. What I would like to see in the conditions tonight is protection for that development, so that footpath can continue to be utilised by local residents in the village. And of course, when these homes are built in the future, it can be used by those new residents as well. We all understand the pressures of which have been placed upon our drainage systems as a result of the weather of which we have seen over the last few days. Kympton, as many I'm sure will be aware, is even more susceptible to flooding, both surface and groundwater.
1 minute left.
Thank you, Chair. And therefore it's vital that we have appropriate mitigation in place to ensure that we don't see a repeat of what happened in 2001, when we had severe flooding, where a number of residents had to leave their homes because of that flooding. And just on the Section 106, because I welcome the contributions, particularly towards Catherine Warrington. What I fear, however, is the contributions towards the library service and the young people service are focused towards Hitchin. Now, the vast majority of residents in Kympton and children direct themselves towards Harpenden. The vast majority of school children go to Harpenden, and therefore I would have thought would have been more appropriate for that contribution to go towards Harpenden, because that's where people base themselves. And it would also have been nice to see a contribution towards the Kympton Primary School as well, to ensure and support growth. But thank you very much, Chair. And I would just ask that if you are minded to grant permission, you grant it for 13 homes, so that there is a scope in the future for more affordable homes, and equally a care home potentially as well.
Thank you, Councillor Munzer. Do we have any matters of clarification or questions for Councillor Munzer? Sorry, Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Munzer, I was looking through the comments on the planning portal, and I was trying to work out where you lived, because I was trying to work out which was your comment. Did you make a comment on the planning portal?
Am I able to answer that? Thank you. Councillor Bryant, this application was submitted in 2021. Unfortunately, I wasn't a member at that time, and therefore I wasn't consulted on this application. I'm unfortunately coming late to it. Otherwise, hopefully, some of the concerns of which I had highlighted would have been ironed out between conversations between myself and the developer.
Can I just have a follow-up question? I think my concern is that the concerns that you've mentioned, which are very laudable, and I'm very, very, very pleased to hear you talking about the need for a different kind of housing mix, which will meet the local residents' needs. But in fact, it's not reflected in the comments that we actually have on the portal. That's probably so. Is this because you've been you've talked to residents going door to door? How many residents have you spoken to who have given this the overall feeling, particularly about things like footpath 33, which was only mentioned, I think, 1 or 2 comments, just to get a feel of the strength in Kympton, please.
Thank you, Councillor Bryant. I'll take those questions in 2 parts. So the first part with respect to footpath 33, that's something of which just going out and about speaking to residents, particularly at the coffee mornings, people are concerned about. It's a well-established footpath. Residents use it to enjoy going, either walking with their families, walking their dogs, etc. It's a local amenity that people would very much like to be protected within the village. And obviously, with all of the new residents of whom potentially are going to move in, if this development does go ahead, then it's a local amenity for them, and it will help to ensure that they're able to promote the active and the green, healthy spaces. With respect to the housing need of which I've mentioned, again, that is something of which I have picked up going out and about, speaking to residents, knocking on doors. As with respect to particularly the point I raise on elderly people, many of them live in 4 3-bedroom homes, and they say to me, we want to downsize, but we just do, but we want to stay in the village, and there is no option for us. And that's certainly something you would get out of local knowledge. I concede it's not necessarily represented on the planning portal, but as their representative, that's the views that I'm putting forward this evening.
Do we have further questions for Councillor Munster? No. In which case, I'd like to invite the applicant's agent, Mr. Muffet, to speak. And you have 5 minutes, and I'll give you a warning when there's 1 minute left in your own time.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, members, for the opportunity to address you this evening. Hopefully, I won't take up all 5 minutes of that. Mostly because you've got a very comprehensive report from the case officer in front of you this evening. But there are a few points that it's perhaps worth emphasising. As has been made clear, this is an allocated site. There is a reference to 13 dwellings in the local plan, but it's explicit an estimate and not a ceiling. In fact, as you'll be aware, local plan policy HS1 states that planning permission for residential development will be granted provided that development broadly accords with the indicative number of homes shown. And the work we've done demonstrates that 15 dwellings and their car parking and the necessary drainage can all be satisfactorily accommodated on the site. This also means that 5 affordable homes would be provided of the mix requested by the housing officer, and that's in the draft Section 106 agreement. In terms of some of the more detailed comments, and again, it's been made clear, but this is an application in outline with only the means of access for approval at this time. What this means is that the council will have control over the layout, scale, mix, external appearance and landscaping of the dwellings at the reserved matter stage. What was proposed is an indicative mix indicated 3 years ago. I think it's been made clear this evening the reserved matters would have to be made certainly within, but we expect earlier, within 3 years. So what we would expect to do is that they would reflect the mix required at that time. But as I said, governed by the reserved matters, which will be in front of you. In terms of Section 106 matters, we've agreed all of the requests from the County Council and the District Council, as well as all the conditions in front of you. Again, as your report makes clear, the tilted balance is applicable in this instance, but notwithstanding that, I think we strongly contend that the benefits of this scheme clearly outweigh any harm. We therefore respectfully urge the committee to approve the application so that these benefits can be delivered. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Do the committee members have any questions for Mr. Muffet? Sorry, I think Councillor Brown, you got there first again.
Thank you, Chair. I wondered, given Councillor Munster's comments about a care home, would the applicant consider that as an alternative to 15 dwellings?
Certainly my experience from other schemes is that care homes to work have to be of the sort of ilk of 60 to 70 rooms. I mean, again, I refer back to the allocation, which is for a much smaller scale of development, the approximately 13. So a care home, from my pretty broad experience, wouldn't work on this site.
Councillor Muir.
Thank you. The other side of your development, there's further land that could be developed. So if that land comes forward for development, could the access be through your housing estate that we might give planning for now, but in future years there'd be no access to the further field beyond your development now?
Thank you. Perhaps just two comments to make in response to that. Firstly, it's in the same ownership, so it's not in the applicant's interest to prevent any possible access to that. That's not a proposal in front of us at the moment, and moreover, all of that's sort of greenbelt, at the moment. So, if that was to come forward, and we'd have to look at the access arrangements, and certainly the frontage with sort of setback properties may enable that to be done, but that's not the proposal in front of us. But as I said, it's perhaps in the applicant's interest as much as anybody's to make sure that they're not precluding opportunities for the future. But as I said, this has been designed for the proposal you've got in front of you this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from the committee? Councillor Mans, was that there? No.
Green.
Okay. In which case, can I invite does the officer wish to respond to any of the issues raised?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think in terms of the housing mix, I consider that it is acceptable in terms of the relevant local plan policies, and there would be certainly a number of some smaller units required in terms of affordable housing. Then the access that is proposed has been considered acceptable by the highways officer, so I don't think there are any issues there in that respect. In terms of the footpath, the only public footpath that I'm aware of is 33, as mentioned, which is to the north of the site, which doesn't adjoin the boundary, and which sort of runs from Luton Road in towards the middle of Kimpton. My understanding is that there is that the east side of the site has been used informally for perhaps by recreational walkers, but it's not a public right of way, and that doesn't, the potential impacts on that I think in any case aren't restricted by the development that is that is proposed for this application, and those are my main responses. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. So the officer's recommendation is to grant permission to this application. Can I have a proposer of a motion to approve, refuse, or defer the application? I have Councillor Ruth Brown. Yes.
I'm happy to propose that we grant. This is outline planning, isn't it? On an allocated site. I can't see any reason not to grant.
Thank you. And do I have a seconder? I believe Councillor Amy Allen was next off the mark.
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. So on the basis of that, do we have any debate from the committee? Councillor Tyson.
I'm perfectly happy to go with the recommendation to grant approval to this, as the principle of development is fine and the access seems fine. I think there are some issues that will need to be dealt with at the reserved matter stage, particularly in terms of the housing, the layout and the housing mix and parking provision or lack of it. But that's for another time within the next 3 years. So we look forward to that.
Thank you, Councillor Tyson. Do we have any further debate? Yes, no? I'm not seeing any hands or lights. In which case, if we could move to the vote, the motion before you is to approve.
Chair, the motion's carried.
Thank you very much. And unless anyone tells me differently, I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. Yes, I was going to say, beat that, Councillor Dennis, if you're watching. The next meeting of this committee is on the 10th of October. And I look forward to seeing you all then. Hopefully I won't be sat in this chair. So thank you all for your good grace. Can I make a serious, but not having chaired before, can I just say how incredibly supportive the officers are? They do make this look easier than it probably is. But thank you so much for your help. Thank you.